All right, folks, we are going to try this one more time. And if this doesn't work, Deborah and I are going to jump on a Zoom call and we are going to because I think this is an important conversation to have for writers and to have folks. Valerie Burns, thanks for being here. Um, to
It's
have
only on phone now. Wi-Fi is completely off on this phone. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to try it again. And
So
it could
sorry.
be, no, it's fine. I mean, it could be me, but I don't think it is.
I don't
But it
think it is.
doesn't matter. Um, we have been talking about writing a short story. And the challenges, well, two challenges. One, I'm losing my voice, but the other challenge is that we've been cut off. And this has been a rich conversation. So I'm going to dial it back, my friend. We're going to start again. This is Debra H. Goldstein. She's the current vice president of Sisters in Crime. She's a novelist, but she's also a very prolific short story writer. And Sisters in Crime has several webinars in our archives, including a very recent one with four wonderful short story writers who talked about why you should write short stories. Writing a short, because you write novels doesn't mean that you can write short stories. They are two different skill sets. So today we're going to talk about the rules, and I'm using air quotes on rules, that Deborah wants to talk about as far as writing a short story. How, as a writer, you can sort of start thinking about how to embrace this. And the first rule you had was to read other short stories. So short stories aren't one thing. And so can you just go through those definitions of the different types yet again?
Surely. When I say to read other short stories, it's to get your knowledge of the structure, to get your knowledge of the fact that you can do it with twist or without twist, to get your understanding of how to narrow your focus. And when I say narrow your focus, it's because you only have so many words to play with. If you're writing a 6-word short story, like the one that's attributed to Hemingway, For Sale, Baby Shoes, Never Worn, I mean, that in 6 words, you have everything. But if you go to a dribble, then you get 50 words only, counting the title. So you better make it a short title. Drabble is 100 words. The flash, which is more common, would be 500 to 1,000. The short story itself that we often think of is 1,000 to 7,500. And then novella is 7,500 to 20,000. But depending on what you're writing for or who you're writing for, you may have a short story word count. Like this week, I'm working on taking a story that came in at 5,500 down to 4,000. I'm having a great time, as you can imagine. Um, but by reading other people, like I really stressed that that webinar was excellent. Why to write short stories? Because you got 4 different perspectives. I recommend reading stories by Barb Goffman, by Art Taylor, by Michael Bracken, by John Floyd, all in the mystery vein, if that's what you want to write, because they have done so many different styles, and
Mm-hmm.
you can learn from that. Because we have to be concise, and that's where we were going for the second rule. Your characters, unlike in a novel where you can have 3 sidekicks and a throwaway on the 3rd page, you can't do that in a short story. A lot of times you have to go back and take 2 of the characters and put them all into one, because maybe one can say the same things that 3 of them would have said. Your theme has to be narrowed down. You can get one theme, maybe a second subplot, but you really have to be narrow because of your word counts. And your approach has to just learn to be concise. A lot of us like to wander and, take a wherever we go.
Well, and this is part of the challenge, and this is why for novelists, even if you're writing a short story with your novel characters, maybe picking one of those secondary characters to be the short story character will make it easier because you're going to be able to think about being concise. Because your third point was that you have to make sure every single word counts. Because this isn't, when somebody says up to 5,000 words, they're not going to look at your story if it's 5,011 words. You've got to get it to where they wanted it or a little bit under if you can, because there's a lot of reasons that people pick short stories for anthologies or for publication. And you want to make sure you're doing everything they are asking you to do to make sure that you're in the running.
Exactly. The same way if you were submitting a novel or anything, read the submission guidelines. That's key. But when you make every word count, you have to remember you have to get setting in there, you have to get the characters in there, you have to get, if it's humor, you have to get that in there, the theme, the clues, the red herrings, the solution. Now you can have a twist, but you may not have a twist. You can have a murder, but you may not have a murder. It may be a heist. It may be a con, but you have to stay true to yourself, but you have to write it and make it tight. And if it's not tight, people get bored. If it has too many words, even in a short story, if you have too many words, people will turn away from it.
Yeah. Um, I, um, and this is sort of the beauty of short stories and why, if you're trying to write them, reading them is such a gift to yourself because you're going to read it first as a reader and then reread it and say, how did they do that? How in that short, that that limited number of words did I get that whole story?
I love to look at things by John Floyd, for an example. He writes a lot of mystery stories. They've been award winning, but he also writes a lot of women's world, those little mini mysteries. And as he says, those have humor. Those are a very easy thing. You put one or two thoughts in and you have a twist at the end that everybody figures out. But if you read one of his more complex stories, you realize, oh, wow, look how much he got in there. A lot of folks don't realize, like when you're writing a book, if we look at some of the Southern writers and we see how they describe the beauty of the land and how it goes on, or we look at somebody like a more literary, like Barbara Bradford used to write for pages about the land. Well, you can only do 3 words here, and you better not have too many adjectives or adverbs in there. So, because you have to pick the key word, the key color for your setting. You have to put the key of everything for what you're doing. And Julie, I'm going to go back to something you said. You mentioned people will write a novella, something in between. A lot of long writers will write a novella to keep their audience sustained till the next book comes out. But they do have to narrow it down. And that's why you'll see, like, for example, I use Kensington's ones. We have a lot of friends who write for those, but they're told they only have a theme. They have to write around nutmeg. They have to write around hot chocolate. It has to be specific. And that's the thing. When you're writing a general short story, you have to, again, be concise.
Well, and I love what you just brought up because this was something I wanted to bring up is that sometimes if you're asked to be in an anthology or you want to submit to be considered, they'll have a theme. So you need to write to that theme, which can be tricky. It also can be really helpful because you're like, okay, I'm going to write about shamrocks, as we're recording this, it's St. Patrick's Day. I'm going to write about shamrocks. That's got to be in the story. And you have to embrace it and use it, but also twist it around a little bit.
Well,
Um,
I can give you 2 examples of my own that came out this year. I was Michael Bracken had an anthology that I was invited to be in, and the anthology was to write something of the '80s. It was called Sleuths Just Want to Have Fun, and it had to be something that tied to an event of the '80s. Well, I started thinking, well, I don't want the Berlin Wall. I don't want this. What was important in the '80s in my world? Who shot JR? That was key. So I wrote a story, Who Shot JR? I created a private eye, a woman who was a little older in life and hadn't quite succeeded at anything, but she goes out to find who shot JR. And the twist at the end is what she does with what she finds out. But then a few months ago, I saw an open call. It asked for woman private eyes. It was from Primacopia. And it said they were doing something called the Not So Frail Woman Detective. The Not So Frail Detective. And I said, oh, I could take my lady from Who Shot JR. But no, all of a sudden it dawned on me, and I wrote a story called Candy Cane on the Case. I made a young private eye who ends up partnered with that older private eye, not to her liking, but her father suggested. And that story became the lead story. It was picked up on open submission. So that's a difference. But that was a fun story to write.
Well, and Deborah, one of the things that we want to talk about, and you sort of brought this up, and I'm going to go off script a little bit, but there are writers like P.M. Raymond and Art Taylor who publish books that have connected short stories. So your PIs that you've written a couple of PIs already this year, they could meet, they could be in other short stories. You can have a world of with these short story characters that eventually you may connect, or maybe there's going to be a novel in there somewhere, but you don't they don't die. I mean, they're not gone. If it's a wonderful idea, it can live on beyond that short story.
Exactly. Level Best is about to bring out an Art Taylor book 10 years after it came out. It's called On the Road with Dell, and I just went blank on the last name. But the point is, that book won the Agatha the year it came out.
Yeah, and which is great. um She,
Yeah.
yep,
Whew.
she's still here. I know we were both panicked for a second.
Okay,
Yes, and
and that was six different short stories, and they show the evolution of the character. It's one of the best books I've ever read of a connected set of short stories. And
yeah,
like I said, I just read this morning that it's coming out again.
which is exciting. And again, PM Raymond is another
Hmm.
person. She was in the webinar that we did about why you should write short stories on Sunday, but she's got a book coming out in April. It's the same thing. And the lovely thing about this is when you do these, redo your short stories, you can re-edit them, you can add, you can fix. Typically when you submit a short story and it's published, you get your rights back within a year. So you can do things with your short stories as well.
And I think Ashley's new book that is just coming out is the same kind of concept. She took food and things, and she took an overlying concept to tie characters she's been writing in different stories together, and it's quite good.
Yeah. Ashley Ruth Bernier, she's a wonderful writer. I mean,
Mhm.
it's, as I've said before, writing a short story is really hard. But I think it's a good challenge. And there are so many anthologies that are open, or ways that you can challenge yourself as a writer. And if you have a contract that was canceled, you've got books out in submission, and you just want to keep writing, this is a great way to keep your skills going.
And sometimes for me, I find it is a wonderful point of relaxation. Now, I know a lot of you on this call do not consider it to be relaxation, but if a story is writing, it just flows. If
Yeah.
it's not, you know it. But at the same time, sometimes when I'm writing a long piece and I get caught up in it, I just don't know where to go with it, I write to short. And that gives me a break.
But Deborah, you talked about the two short stories you've got out this year. Do those
Actually have
characters?
8 out this year. It's been a good year.
It's been a very good year. But do these two PI characters? Do you think about them? Do you, as you're looking at calls, you're thinking about other things? Do one of them sit on your shoulder and say, "Hey, I'd love to be in another story"?
It did this time. It doesn't normally.
Yeah.
It's funny because I don't think in terms of serial writing. I look at, I like to look at if it's got a theme or a call, I like that because it does help you narrow it in. But don't always go with your first instinct in a short story when you see an open call, because half the world is going with that same instinct. Look for a twist. Um, I had one that they wanted, one of my earliest published short stories was Grandma's Garden. And that one, they wanted something with rain. And I went and did Grandma's Tears, and I put a garden outside on a patio and did a complete twist on what the normal version of the short story that call was for. And they loved it. And that one went on again to win an award.
Yeah.
And it was on a podcast, and it was reprinted somewhere else. That's another thing you can do with short stories is reprints.
Yes, yes. So let's talk about that too, because one of, your points that you brought up with me was if you're accepted, your short story is accepted, celebrate. That's great.
Hmm.
But if it gets rejected, it's not, you're not done.
Never. If anything, look at it again, see what can be improved, and maybe it can't be. Maybe it really is a good short story as it is. And I will tell an anecdote on that in a moment. But a lot of times, the editor may have two short stories, and they may have two short stories that are on exactly the same theme. They use one, and they can't use both. So there was nothing wrong with your story. Or maybe the other one was accepted first if they were doing a rolling acceptance type factor. I went to write for an anthology one time. There was going to be a general open call. I wrote a story that I thought was one of the best stories I had ever written at that time. And they never got around to putting the anthology together. It was sitting there for months and months. And I'm going, this was a good short story. So I took it out of submission to them and I submitted it to Alfred Hitchcock, which can take 11 months to get a response from. It was accepted. That is, a short story that then went on to win to excuse me, I can't say win. It was a finalist for the Agatha, the Anthony, and everything else. But it never got into that anthology, which didn't come out for another 2 years. And to tell you the truth, I'm sort of glad it didn't.
But
And
this
it's the
is
night they
also
burned Miss Dixie's place, by the way.
but this is the lesson is, or writing short stories to hone craft, to challenge yourself, and then having them in a file and being able to look at them when you see a call and say, all right, let's, this one can do, or I've worked on this, the third draft of it, I'm going to send it out for submission. It's never a waste of time to work on short stories.
No, and as most short story authors will tell you, keep a file. That story may not be good now, but 6 years from now, there may be a call that just matches it. And then you can tweak it at that point. I have one short story that's not selling. I don't know what the problem of it is. Well, I really do. But I keep changing it to whatever the location of the call is. And eventually it's going to find a home.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great point. I also play with lengths
Yes.
as you're working, because sometimes in an anthology, again, if you have a 1,000-word story, that may be perfect for what they need to find. Because as with anything, it's not always about the story itself, about the quality of the story. It can be, does it fit where, what's the arc, what else is in there, and putting together an anthology is a very hard thing to do.
And don't be alarmed if you're writing only at a certain length. When I first started writing short stories and I was trying to be as concise as possible, they were all coming out to be 1,000 to 1,200 words. Now, 6, 7 years later, 70 some stories published, they keep coming out between 4 and 5,000. And I realize I'm adding too much at times. I have to go back and cut. But a lot of those 1,200 words did exactly what Julie said. There might have been somebody who was longer that the editor liked, but then I could fit in because they only wanted so many pages. When we've edited different short story anthologies, we have found that we can only have so many pages because
Yeah.
of the cost.
Right. Right. And this may sound like heartbreaking in a way, but it's also, it's a practical thing. If you can only have 350 pages in an anthology, because that's what it's going to, that makes the most sense. What they're going to choose to fit in those 350 pages matters. So if you can submit two things and you submit one long piece and one short piece, that may also help raise your, I mean, my first short story that was published was under 1,000 words. It was like just 1,000 words, and I think that part of what helped was it was 1,000 words that they could
They
they
could
could fit it in.
exactly. It just to writing a short story just is fun if you let yourself have the fun. Because once you can be concise, you go, this is kind of fun. I wrote one that was like 1,000 words, but it had so many plot twists. And I'm going, I'm really having a ball with this. Um, but you can find whether it's open call, whether it's deliberate call, whether it's just to a theme or not to a theme, it gives you a wide variety to write. And when you're writing a novel, you're more glued in for so many months to one concept, one set of characters. When you're writing short stories, you can be all over the place in different time periods.
Well, and as we're wrapping this up, and I'm so glad that, after a couple of false starts, we did get this to go, and we will be sharing it. But that idea of having fun, if you're feeling stuck or you're feeling like it's drudgery or you're just uninspired or you're going through a tough time as a writer, write a short story and have fun doing it. If you write, we both know writers, cozy writers, who write incredibly dark short stories because they can exercise those demons. I mean, have fun doing it.
Well, the book that I had just come out is a collection of short stories. That's my With Our Bellies Full and the Fire Dying, came out this past year from White City Press. Jay Hartman edited. But it is a collection of the different short stories that I had, was either a finalist or won an award for. And it's exactly what you're saying. Those have more of my darker side because I wrote cozy. I wrote funny cozy with the Sarah Blair series. With this, um, I'm writing about the sins of family, friends, and the sometimes redemption. And they do tend to be a darker side. Now, some are cozy, some are not. One of the fun things when the book came out was Drew and Christopher each were agreed to review it. They'd never done this before. She only reviewed the cozy stories in it. He only reviewed the dark ones. And they both set up their review on the same day and referred to each other. It was
Oh, that's
wonderful.
great. That's great. So for folks listening, Drew in Love and Christopher Zukowski, who writes Bolo books, both incredibly supportive uh, uh, people in so many ways in the crime writing community, and both short story writers themselves.
Mhm.
So that's a ton of fun. So rejected doesn't mean forever with a short story. It means you have something for another day.
And if it is rejected and you can't rewrite it, put it in that file. Maybe something will come to you down the road. But don't give up. Rejection, it's a business. Rejection happens.
Yeah, yeah. But so you've inspired me, Deborah, to start again and try. There's a submission that closes on March 31st, so I'm going to give it a shot.
Hmm.
But thank you and congratulations on your collection that was out last year and on 8 short stories coming out in different collections this year. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I'm
Um,
having a ball.
yeah, see, isn't it? That's it. There you go. You're having fun, and that's so important. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for dealing with the tech, and I'm so glad that this worked. Thank you, Deborah.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.